Hello, everyone. Thank you again for joining us for another customer success webcast with the customer success community. Today, we are going to be talking about developing an actionable health score. And we have the fantastic Steve Hopkins, who is Director of Customer Success and Support at Culture Amp, with us today. Steve joined Culture Amp when they had about 200 customers and has continued to lead their CS and support practices as they continue to grow past 2,000 customers globally. He's based in San Francisco, so thank you, Steve, for being up so early for us. He's previously worked at Yammer when it was acquired by Microsoft for $1.2 billion in 2012. Over to our topic for today. Understanding and acting on customer health is one of the key responsibilities of a world-class customer success manager, and yet it's one of the most hotly debated topics in the field. Having a health score model, which allows us to understand the health of customers at each point of their journey, helps us scale our operation and easily gain a high-level view of our book of business. Building such a model from scratch, though, can be challenging. What metrics do we take into consideration? How simple or how complex does it need to be truly scalable? But most importantly, where do we even start? And this is what Steve and I will be talking about today very shortly. The webcast is hosted by the Customer Success Network. I'm your host, Morika Georgieva. I am a part of the Customer Success Network and a Customer Success Manager at Beamery. I've seen that today we have a number of veterans amongst you, so you guys would know that the purpose of this webcast is to be as interactive as possible. So please do use the Q&A functionality on the bottom of your screen during the webcast to submit your questions. We'll be pausing halfway through the presentation once to answer some of the questions, and again, towards the end, you're gonna have another chance to get your questions answered. The webcast will be live streamed, as always, in our workplace community. This is where you can watch it in future and continue the conversation once we have concluded today. Okay, so without further ado, over to you, Steve. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thanks, Marika, and it's wonderful to be here with everybody. I've been really looking forward to this and looking forward to joining you all. So perhaps let's kick off and let's dive right into it. So developing, I'm really excited today to sort of dive in and talk about creating an actionable customer health score. And I think importantly, what I'm going to focus on talking about today is the elements of the health score that you need to think about developing and the way you might think about beginning to go through that process, but also how you really action that. And so some of the things I'm going to talk about are not actually necessarily directly related to a customer health score, but they help you make it really actionable. So if you feel like at some points I'm off topic a little bit, I'm hoping that the topic is around having it be actionable more so than having it be the perfect customer health score. And I think that's kind of a good way to start in sort of kicking this off, which is really focusing in on why we need a customer health score. And so for me, as Marika said, I joined Culture Amp about 3.5 years ago. And at that time when I came in, there was a few customer success managers, or we call them customer success coaches at Culture Amp, but there were a few people in customer success. We had a really good approach and way that we handle customers. We had a very sort of well-defined process that we used to take them through onboarding, to take them through the various different parts of our customer journey. But we didn't really have a lot of metrics or instrumentation around how that worked. And I remember actually when I started, even in my first week, we had a special event that we called Project Day. And on Project Day, I gathered with a couple of our coaches back then who were really savvy and sort of coming from a data analytics kind of background. And we cut together our first version of what is now our customer health score in an Excel Google sheet. Luckily to say though, we changed things as we went along. And actually one of the key points in my journey with customer health as an idea was probably about 2 years ago, when my new boss at that point, a chap by the name of JD Peterson, came to me kind of one sort of late afternoon about 5:30. I said, "Oh, do you want a beer?" And I said, yeah, I'd really love a beer. Let's do that. And JD had just joined us, and we still didn't really, whilst we had a customer health score in place in our Google Sheet, it wasn't something that we'd operationalized. It was too hard to pull together. It was too hard to run the data to sort of do that. And so we did it maybe once a quarter. It wasn't really anything more active than that. But JD sort of, we went and sort of grabbed a beer, as you sometimes do, and kind of sat down. And as we were talking about our strategic customers, particularly our largest customers or our best logos, not always by revenue, but our best logos, we kind of came to this point where he said, we really need to know how we're going with these customers. We really need to know and be able to report to exec, report to our board, and report out across the business about how we're driving success in these customers. And I share that as a little tale because I'm sure many of you are finding yourself in a similar position. You're in either the role where you're leading the customer success organization across the globe, you're leading it across a region, or perhaps you're sort of working directly with customers, but you're interested in why the customer health metric might be useful from many different contexts. And I think that pressure that exists in a business is sort of one that I really wanted to talk to today. And so from that evening where we sort of had a beer, we sort of grew from there, and we really tried to understand a customer health score and an approach that would really help us achieve those things. The other sort of item here that kind of led to that, the thing that was important for us at least to have a customer health score or begin thinking about putting a customer health score in place, was that, as many of you perhaps will also be finding at this point, our customer base was changing reasonably dramatically as we grew as a small startup into a larger kind of tech company. I don't class this as a startup anymore. Back at that point even, we were sort of really coming through that early period where you've found product market fit and you've got a number of customers. So we were really in that stage where the growth in our ACV was meaning that our customers were worth more and more. And so we had to move away from this process where we could look at a blended kind of metric or a blended approach at our customers and start really looking in at the detail, line by line. Where is each customer? How healthy is each customer? And how do we know what we're doing to make them healthier as they go along? So these were some of the reasons that really, this was some of the climate that led to us having a customer health score. And that's why a customer health score is important. I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir on this, or preaching to the converted, but the importance of a customer health score is really to help you as both a CS leader and a CS manager, and it's working with your customer to really understand and calibrate about how well your customer is doing, how well they are using your platform, and then what you may need to do to help change the trajectory of what they're doing. So let's talk a little about what it is. So we've talked a little about why it's important. Now let's talk a little bit about what it is. So, and this is sort of one of those areas where I want to talk a little bit about how you make something actionable, not just how you make a customer health metric. So we have two things. There's two sides to the coin of making and creating something that's an actionable health metric for you within your business. The first one is an actual customer health score. And we're going to talk about that in much more detail later today and how you might go about creating that. But at this point, I want to really define what that is. So when I think about customer health and a customer health score or metric, I think about it being an objective, product-driven metric that helps you make sense of a customer's adoption of your platform. So to pick up a couple of those key points that I've got in bold here, it's objective. So the first thing is your customer success managers, or you as a customer success manager, should not be able to change the customer health score. That's kind of like important rule number one. It has to be almost factually driven from product data or some other data that you've got. And that's really that second point about it being product driven. So you're getting data, you're getting intel, you're getting stats out of your product. You might also be getting intel or information out of your marketing stack, or you might be getting intel and information out of your support stack. So it's data driven, and it's really, and that leads that objectiveness. The third point here is it helps you make sense. The customer health metric or score is not a panacea. It's never factual. As factual as you can get it. It's always just one view of the customer. And so it's really just a piece of data that you can use to help you make sense of what's going on. And that's really, you're in this situation where you're trying to understand where you stand with the customer, and you're trying to pull together all of this complex information from the value of your relationship, the climate that the customer's facing, the economic conditions, and also how they're using your product. So you're really trying to make sense of that. And then obviously what we're all trying to achieve is the customer's adoption of our platform. Ultimately, we believe striving towards having them recognize the value that they're getting from their subscription and staying with us. So that's the customer health side. On the account mood side, And you may use different terms for this. We call it customer account mood at Culture Amp because I really wanted to capture the sense that this is a subjective gut feel rating that someone might apply to an account to forecast the risk present ahead of the renewal. So some of you may use it and call it account health even. There's a number of different things that it gets called. But for me, mood really encapsulates what this is. And some of you may have been familiar or used the traffic light type system for this. The customer's green, the customer's yellow, the customer's red. We all know red is bad, green is good. But for me, this is the other side of the coin that's just as important to take into account with customer health and really makes the customer health metric much more valuable. So having a subjective gut feel from your customer success manager or your account manager or your renewal manager also present on the account really helps you triangulate the data and give you a sense of how you're going. And it's also like more often than not targeted towards answering the question ultimately, do we think this customer is going to renew when their subscription's up? To just give you a little brief intro to this, this is exactly what I've talked about. This is the tension that exists within our Salesforce. So just so you can kind of see it, you can see the health score is the larger pink box down the bottom. That's sort of the breakout. And I'm going to talk you through a little bit more about how we came up in creating that metric. And then up the top there, you can see the account mood, the orange ranking. And so you also will pick up there, we use orange, which is not one of the colors I mentioned before. So I can walk you through a little bit about how we think about that. So how do we use customer health? So great, we've talked about why it's important. We've also talked about what it is, but then how do you use it and how do you think about how you operationalize that and use that within your business? So I'm going to go through 3 things really quickly and then we'll pause for some Q&A to dive deeper into sort of the basics of customer health. So for me, there are 3 different ways that we use customer health. We have individuals who take action with it. And this is really the audience here is your customer success manager who's dealing with the customers. They're working with the customers on a day-to-day basis. They're using customer health and a customer health score in a certain way. And so we'll talk a little about that. We have teams that are using a customer health metric, small groups of people, perhaps it's on a regional basis, perhaps it's even smaller than that, who are using the customer health metric together to share and learn about the shape of their bob or their book of business and how they're going as a group, and how they might need to prioritize or work with each other to help move the needle on a particular different group of customers. And then finally, you've got the org's use of a customer health metric, which is really around forecasting and predicting risk at a board and exec level. So my board, my exec will come to me, there's a reasonable cadence to that. And every week to month, there is some level of accountability that I have to present back and give an accurate forecast of where we're standing in the month or the quarter or the year in terms of our gross retention and churn. So to talk a little about this very briefly, one of the most important parts of a customer health score to help individuals take action is to actually create it in such a way that it is actionable and is broken down at the factor level. And so actually the inspiration for this for us came from our product. So it may be a slight little plug here, but this is what you see if you're an admin of Culture Amp or a user of Culture Amp on the reporting side. And the thing I'll draw your eyes to here is that many of you might be familiar with the idea of employee engagement, but we break that down into a number of factors that are kind of the number of bars you see below that large engagement breakout. And you want to try to do the same thing with your customer health score. So here in the engagement context, I can see that learning and development is one of our lower drivers for engagement, or one of the things that we could really focus in on to improve, to help improve our engagement score. In the same way, you want to really be able to create a customer health score that allows your customer success managers to see a top line score that will indicate some level of health or some level of health within an account, but then be able to dive in and say, what's going on there? What is the actual factor that's driving that health? And what's the thing that's lower that I can focus on as a CSM? Also, it helps you really understand that each customer is different. So every customer is a unique snowflake, even though sometimes we know that's not necessarily true. But this allows you at the account level to really understand the individual customer's health metric. I think one mistake many CSMs make is that they try to use a customer health metric across a more aggregate blended they look at the customer health metric across a blended view of their bob. And actually, in some ways, the thing we want our CSMs to be really concerned about is the account level value of the customer health score. What is if your customer has a customer health score of 40, what does that mean for that customer and what are you doing about it? And then finally, that helps you do all the things, right? Customer success management is inherently busy. You're inherently juggling a lot of different priorities. And so a customer health score at the end of the day can really help you look at your entire bob and sort of stack rank it by your healthiest and non-healthiest customers, and then really prioritize, look at the factors that might be driving the unhealthy ones and the factors that might be driving your healthy ones, and then dive in to take action, which you may have missed if you were just looking at a chronological customer journey where you're doing a three-month touch point or a 6-month check-in or a quarterly QBR or something to that effect. That's how individuals should really be thinking about customer health metric and how to use it. How do our teams think about helping and using it? And really, there's only one point here, which is that teams have a cadence and they have a meeting structure. And you really should be thinking about using your customer health score and bringing that customer health score into your team meeting structure every week, month, quarter, whatever your cadence looks like. The final point here, this is actually a shot of our team out in London. So I know I'm talking to a lot of folks who are based in London today. So this is our fantastic team, plus a few travelers that came in here. And importantly, you see in this picture, you see this is not just our customer success team. There are people in this picture who are from our customer support group, from our customer success group, and also from our sort of account. Well, actually, there's no one in here from our account management practices, but our account management practices are a really important part of our team too. And so the customer health score is not just for customer success. And one of the biggest mistakes you can make is to think that. And so really, when you're thinking about this, think about the broad tent of all of the customers, all of the people that are working in with your customer, and how they can all use the same score. As a little plug, we're hiring in London. So if you're interested or looking around for a job, please let us know. I can help you with that a little later. And then finally, if you excuse the minor plug, before I wrap up and we go into some questions on just what is a customer health score and how we think about it, it's important to think about how the organization needs to use your customer health score. And I think sometimes with a customer health score, we can get really fancy and we think we get really taken by the idea of having it in a tool or buying a tool, or we need to purchase a Gainsight or a Tatango or something like that to be able to help us do these things. What I'm showing you is actually a exact replica, except the numbers, I've changed the numbers of how we forecast and report out along our gross retention, net retention, and churn across the business, both to a board and exec level, and then down to everyone that wants to see it. And so I think it's really important that the customer health score is in some way reflected in these types of documents and these kind of rhythms. And so for me, there's a cadence that takes place on that kind of reporting. There's a weekly, monthly, and quarterly. And so I need to be able to sort of look at this and say, okay, cool, here's our current risk profile for our global BOB and how we're thinking about moving the needle on that. And so our customer health score does play into this in some way, shape, or form, although it's not directly represented here on the sheet. So that's some of the different ways you can use a customer health score and the different ways you would use it. I want to pause at this point to take your questions and see if there's anything I can help you understand about what a customer health score is, why you use it, and how you might use that within your organization.
Thank you, Steve, for a very exciting first part here. You've definitely gotten everyone very interested and excited about health score. As we said, one of the most hotly debated topics in the field. We have 2 questions for you, which were posted during the first part of the presentation. Brian's asking, what would you be thinking to bring a health score into a team meeting context? For example, here's one red customer I've been nurturing this week or month.
Yeah, great question. So I think the first thing is it's customer health and your account mood. So the first thing that I would expect to see in a team level meeting is that you have a shared view of all of the customers that make sense for that team to be looking at. And once we're at Culture Amp, we call our meetings that take place around this, we call them Bob Ups. So a book of business up, I guess, that's just what we've called it. So at a Bob Up for us, the team will gather. It's normally the full cross-functional team. So it's customer success, it's account management. It's sometimes also another role that we have called a people science group. Although often in many of your businesses, you might even have sales engineers or solutions engineers. Anyone that's involved in delivering the implementation or the success of the customer to them. We'll get together in a room and we will look at different cuts of that bob. So we might look at all of the accounts that are in a risk mood. So for us, that's anything that's orange or red, and that's the subjective side of things. We might then look at a different cut that looks at all of the customers stack ranked by healthiest customer health score. And that's the objective side of the house. And so that way we can sort of get a real feel for that. We might also then typically look at, we have some level of WIP in our BOB as well. So we can also look at customers by status, who's onboarding, who's in BAU, who needs an FSR, which is our version of a QBR. And so we might look at that. I think the final thing here on this one is the thing you're looking for as a team is not necessarily just, even though you might look at the stack rank, so let's go through the list, all the oranges, all the reds, all the healthy customers, all the non-healthy customers by score, you're actually looking to spot differences between those two things. And that's why those two scores are really important, and that it leads to the actionability of it. So for example, if I was in a team meeting and I saw a customer that was marked green, so the subjective CSM or AM kind of ranking of that account was green and it's really healthy, but it had a very low health score, then I would immediately have questions about why we've marked that as green. In a similar way, if I saw a customer that we had marked as red or orange, but it had a really good customer health score, perhaps something for us, a score like 40 or 50, then I would look at that and say, wow, they're using the platform really well. They seem to be really healthy. Why are we marking them as red or orange? What's going on? And so that it allows you to really quickly spot exceptions and dive into that as a team. And then as a team, you're able to make sense of what's going on in your BOB together, prioritize the actions, and then work together to try to resolve those things.
Amazing. And we've got a number of other questions actually. One related particularly to advocacy. So how do you use health score to factor in or advise on advocacy for customers? So for Frances, the CSMs at her company are responsible for reviews and references from current customers, and she's looking for ways to look at our health score along the way to determine who are those advocacy candidates.
Great. Yeah, great question. Topical for me as well. We've got our big global, we've got a really large, big global event happening here in San Francisco in July, which we call Culture First. And so right now we're in the process of, I'm in the process, and also Nina Hancock, who I believe is on the call, who leads our customer success practice out in EMEA, is in the process of trying to solve this exact question. Who would we want on stage? Who should we have coming out there? And so really, I'm going to sound a little bit like a broken record. It would be kind of the same answer as how you run your meetings. I would look for things that I would look for the account mood where the coaches have put things in as green. So there's some reason why the coach or the customer success manager, will think that account is healthy and in a really great place to be able to provide a reference or that kind of material that you're looking for. But then I would pair it again with their customer health score. And so in that way, I'd be really looking for customers that have a really high health score, and I would be looking for them that have a really good sort of healthy or sort of positive account mood. It's quite a simple answer. I'm sorry if you sort of want to go into further detail, but I think that's probably, like, at a very simple level, that's how I would be thinking about it.
Amazing. We have time for two more, questions. So related to how do we look at your full customer database and look at the health score there? Good question from Raymond here. He understands that metrics can be unique to a customer. However, how do we collect metrics to ensure that they're quantitatively accurate across your database?
Yeah, it depends on what you mean by accurate. There's a number of different ways it can be accurate or not. So I think the first thing to say is that no health score is perfect. Yeah. It just is it's a number that helps. The number itself doesn't have to be perfectly, what's the word I'm looking for? The number itself doesn't have to be perfectly representative. So it doesn't have to give you an insight into exactly what's happening, but it needs to be the same across your data set. So you can't have customers getting ranked one way and other customers getting ranked another and then trying to compare them. So it needs to be an apples to apples comparison. The other way you can take your question is more around, how do you know whether a health score is good or bad? And ultimately, there's some level of calibration that you just need to learn how to do. I can now tell you that a customer health score for us at over 30 is really healthy. And we've done some analysis on churn and other things like that to really get to that level of understanding now in our BOB. But also when we rolled the score out, we also already had our account mood ranking in. And so we were able to do a correlation analysis to what our coaches had subjectively ranked. And we saw a correlation. So we were able to say, yep, the way that we've built this health score, and I'm going to go into that detail later on, but the way we've built this health score actually does match to how our coaches, our customer success people, are subjectively ranking the account. This is probably okay and safe for us to use in that way.
Yeah, amazing. We have another question related to how you use health score. Does the health score also help you dictate the touch point frequency for each of your customers?
That's a great question. I think that depends on what level you're trying to think through. If you're trying to think from the org level, I would say no. I don't really look at our health score and what's the right way to say this? It does and it doesn't. I think it depends again on which point you're at. Are you talking about the individual's perspective, the team's perspective, or the org's perspective? From the individual's perspective, no. I would say a low health score might not necessarily be a touch point that we have scheduled on our customer journey, but it might induce or encourage a customer success manager to reach out unprompted. So I would say that's the kind of expectation we're expecting at that level, that a CSM is looking at their BOB, or they're looking at their own personal stack of accounts, and they're seeing customer health scores that are low, and then they're using that to take action and reach out and create a touch point. At the top end, at the org level, I tend to look at things by cohorts. So I do look at the cohort of customer health every week. And so at that level, I'm trying to learn about where the points are where our customer health score might begin dropping off. And so for us, I know that our customers are as healthy as they'll kind of ever be at about the 3rd or 4th month of their subscription, because they've just finished their onboarding. And so they've just we're a business which is really focused around helping customers collect and act on feedback. So surveying is a big part of our product. So they've run their first survey, they've run their first thing, which involves using all of the product in a really good way most of the time. So our customer health scores are really highest at that point, but we do see a drop off in the aggregate around month 7, 8, 9. So obviously from a design perspective, when I'm thinking about the customer journey, I'm thinking about what else can we do in months 5, 6, 7 to really create more usage in that sort of 8, 9 month mark, so that when they hit the renewal, they're also feeling the glow of kind of having used Culture Amp before then. So I hope that answers the question, but it depends very much on the context you're in.
Amazing. And I think that's some super exciting context. Now, I'm not going to lie, we've had a number of questions come in as you were speaking, and a lot of them do refer around what usage metrics you include, what tools you use, how exactly do you put the health score together. But I do believe this is some of what you're going to show us just now. So we're going to let you take us through the second part of the presentation. And guys, we are going to have further time at the end to ask everybody's questions. Over to you, Steve.
Yeah, sure. And I appreciate that what I've covered so far is reasonably high level. I know that we want to, there's an element of this topic where you can get into the weeds really heavily and want to talk about the finite things that you're putting in and putting out, and what metrics are you using, which tool do you use, and everything else. I'm going to answer some of those things now. I'm not going to promise you that I'm going to walk through all of the different factors that we included in ours. But I will give you some indication about some of them we chose and how we did it. So let's get into it. So this is how we developed our I'm going to walk you through now how we at Culture Amp developed our customer health metric and how we continue to do this. We're actually in the middle of a project now where we're revamping it and iterating on it, because we've learned a lot about the signals that we're taking in. So there's 4 steps basically, and I hope this will cover off a lot of the questions. I'll actually try to wrap this up a little bit quicker so that we can dive into your questions and your Q&A to help you understand where you're at. So the first one is we've got our data ready, and this is probably where a lot of your questions are coming from. So first thing, everyone, you got to go work with product. This is not a thing that you can do in your silo. It's not a thing that actually is just a customer success thing. If you really want this to be successful, you have to be working across the whole business, and you have to be working to build a metric that the whole business is going to find useful. Our account managers, our AEs, our sales practices, our product practices, our org practices all find the customer health metric useful, and importantly, they can all see it. So they're all able to log into a system. They're all able to get access to it. They're all able to use that. We also use it in all of our growth or our sort of our kind of executive level reporting. And so one of the most important things is, so there's obviously a hygiene element of actually getting your data ready and understanding what you've got, and that. I'm going to go into it in more detail. I'm just going to go through the agenda, if you like, of this section. So you got to get your data ready. You then have to define your factors. So if you think back to the survey that I showed before, what are the different areas you want to be able to drill in on? You then need to test the results, which is kind of what we talked about before, about correlating it to some of the signals you may already have. And then you need to operationalize it. You need to get it out there so that people in the different contexts can use it in the different ways. So first of all, you need to get your data ready. And so unfortunately, this screenshot is nowhere near big enough for you. For those of you that really wanted to understand all of the signals we put in, this is the screenshot that shows you that. We have probably somewhere in the order of 20 to 30 different signals that we include, and they're all in Salesforce. So first thing, everyone's wondering, which tool do you use? How do you use it? What do I need to go and buy? I would actually urge you to use Salesforce as much as you can. I'm a big fan of Gainsight and Tongo and some of those things. And we've certainly had people in our business that have used those in the past. There are certainly wonderful solutions, but depending on where you're at in the cycle, Salesforce achieves a lot of the things. I'm going to guess that a lot of you have a CRM, and for a lot of you, that's going to be Salesforce. So I'm going to mention Salesforce directly here. But if you don't have Salesforce, just think your CRM. That's the place that I think you should start. Some reasons for that are that it normally is being used by a really large portion of the business. Certainly most of the customer facing group will be using Salesforce. And then also you tend to typically in a business, and my context is, we were a startup that was growing up and scaling up. In that context, you will tend to be hiring people that can help you support the kinds of things you need to do. I think as a customer success manager or a customer success leader, you're not always going to have ops resources to be able to help you do the things you need to do, or analytics resources to help you do the things you need to do. And so using the stack that you're already using is a really important thing. So you'll need to work with product to get those signals out. So we worked with product. We actually started just in an Excel spreadsheet. We built out you're trying to ask yourself, we built out a number of the different factors, and then we went to product and said, what can you give us? How can we get this data and feed it into Salesforce? And then importantly, and this is like a little tip that really unlocked this for us, but for those of you, I'm going to assume most of you have not been in Salesforce as like an operations or an admin type role before. So you're going to probably need a Salesforce developer or a consultant or someone external to help you kind of get the connector going between your product and Salesforce. We have someone that we use, an external contractor that we have on a 2-day to 3-day kind of retainer. You may not need that level of help. You also don't need it ongoing. So it's a project that can be reasonably small or contained, but you will need someone that knows how to connect data and APIs into Salesforce. So that's probably a first important thing. The final thing is you need to map not just your product data, but think about your marketing and your support data too. So our customer health score also takes into account support data, like how many tickets a customer might have sent, or that's one of the main signals. Their CSAT is another one from Zendesk, which is the system that we use for support. But our marketing tool is also actually just as important, and even in some ways is even more important earlier on in the customer's life. So we take in signals like whether they're a part of whether they're subscribed to our newsletter or not, whether they've gone to events of ours or not. And we actually have a way of sort of calculating that. That kind of really gets me into the second point, which is once you're into this process of sort of building out the data that you need to be really defining your factors. And so we defined 5. If you sort of go back to that screenshot I showed before, at a top level, that remember the big pink box, there's one aggregate customer health score that we have, and then there are 5 factors, and the factors actually roll up into that aggregate score. These are our 5 factors. So we have participant engagement, admin engagement, sponsor engagement, product satisfaction, and community engagement. And we have basically, if you think the right way to think about this is not necessarily about a mix of data that you pull in and you like toggle to sort of get the right mix of scores. The best way to think about this is really ask yourself questions about what you consider a successful looking customer looks like. So at a participant engagement score, you can see some of the questions we're asking ourselves is how engaged are the employees using our product to provide feedback and review reports? How many reports are customers looking at or sharing when they use our platform? How many ways might a customer be taking action on those reports? Are the sorts of questions that we're asking ourselves to really understand how healthy a customer is. And then once you've got your questions, then go back to your product team and see if you can get the answers to those questions with data that's objective. Finally, once you've got your final kind of question set almost, and you know that you can get the data that you need for that, then you're trying to figure out how to weight the data. So is it more important that a customer shares reports widely or that they take action on them widely? That would be a question for us that we would answer. And then you would weight the data that you have and the way that the data looks to sort of be representative of that to give you a score. tip number one here, keep this simple. Do it in a Google Sheet or an Excel spreadsheet or something like that. You're going to be changing this a lot as you go through this process. So don't build this into a tool or into Salesforce right away. You almost want to be getting the final baked version into a Google Sheet or an Excel format first. And then once you're ready, then go and kind of do the work to pull it into Salesforce or whatever other tool you're using. Then you want to test the results. So before you even pull it into the tool necessarily, although I think we did actually pull it in the tool when we did this, you want to compare your objective data to your subjective data. So I would say first tip number one, as much as this is focused in on the customer health score and building that right now, if you're not doing some version of the account mood, I would start that today. And you can start that's easy. That's a really simple one. You can do that by adding a field to Salesforce and just saying, hey, everyone, I now expect you to put an account mood on your customer. And we're going to use that. Doing that early will help you build up a sense of what your good customers look like and what your customers that are not such a great place look like. And then when you have your customer health score, you'll be able to sort of compare the data to that score and give you a sense. This is some analysis that we did at the very beginning of our customer health score project, or once we had the score built. We sort of built everything. We said, we think this is the mix of factors and the different data that's going to tell us how healthy a customer is. And these are the different factors that we have. And then we actually went through and correlated that back to the health score. And what you're looking for is a chart that kind of looks like this. Like you would expect your green customers to have a higher health score based on what you've built. For us, we use 4 moods. So we would expect our blue customers to be healthier than our orange, but not so healthy as our green. Orange, obviously, healthier than our red, not so healthy as the blue, and red obviously should be the lowest score. And so we saw this pattern here, which gave us confidence that the score that we had built was going to be indicative of us and tell us that a customer was healthy or not. Obviously, there's a problem here in the data in that you're comparing one data set to the other to then compare them both and say that they're both good. So at the first point, there's a risk that people could use customer health to inform the mood. But as time has gone on, the customer health score and moods have become more separated, which is actually what you're looking for. So you can get 2 different distinct data points to look at and compare to. Finally, and this is probably the most important thing, if you do all of that, that's kind of the fun stuff. It's the stuff we all love to geek out on. But it matters little if you don't use it. And that's why I wanted to spend a lot of the time up front of the conversation talking about the different contexts that you'll use the data in, because that's actually the most important thing you're going to be doing. How should you be helping people make sense of how to use a metric or a score like that in their work? And so you have to make it real in your organization. If you're the customer success leader and you're not taking the score into your executive level meetings, then why do you need it? If you're not using it to forecast and generate kind of the important business metrics that you need around gross retention or churn, then why are you getting the rest of the org to use it? Just as much, if you're not going to meet with your individual customers based on customer health score, then why do your CSMs need it? And at the team level, if your teams are not going to use that data, then why build that metric at all? So I think really think about the different contexts you need that data to show up in. Think about how you want your teams to use it. And then when you roll the score out, make sure that people understand how the health score works. Make sure they understand how to use it and understand the different contexts that you would expect them to use it in. And then live it, you know? You have to be the one that does that. And as an example, actually, there's one way that we do this at Culture Amp that I think has really worked for us. Myself and a counterpart of mine, sort of the person that heads up our global account management practice, a chap by the name of Will Wahane, we do a monthly meeting with all of our regional groups. We call it the monthly value review. And in the monthly value review, we do exactly this. We look at the data, we compare account mood with health score, and we really dive in and look to understand the risks that are present in the BOB 3 months out and 6 months out based on cohort. And so in that meeting, like, people get the signal that we really look at this stuff and that we really care and that we use it strongly to sort of drive our kind of management of the BOB. That's it, actually. So unless I want to I might just wrap up now and then we can take questions. But my challenge is to you, and I feel like hopefully you've taken some really useful stuff from this. There is actually a post, a lot of the slides I've shared, I think probably the last thing I probably should have covered, I wanted to cover off earlier, is that this is not a solo thing. If you're the CS leader, or if you're the customer success manager that really wants to take this on as a project, you're going to need help. And for this, actually, like, a lot of this work is actually not my work. It's the work of everybody else in our business, particularly a couple of individuals I wanted to call out. A chap by the name of Andrew Mowat here in San Francisco really drove this project from start to beginning. So a lot of the work that you've seen here that I've been showing is Andy's work, and having a partner like that in your ops group is really, really important. So that's step number one. And we just couldn't do this without Andy and Andy's help. My leads, Nina and everybody else that I kind of work with directly, are crucial to this. They're the ones that are going to be telling you whether the score you've got is working or not. They're the one, if I'm looking at a number and I'm saying, oh, there's a customer health score of 40, that seems really great. And Nina turns around to me and says, no, Steve, 40, we're not using that anymore. It's not accurate. It's not working. It's not happening. And there's, people don't believe in the metric. Then that's something I take really, really importantly. And we then seek to fix the metric to make sure it's accurate. So you need people everywhere in your org to really be using this and to be pulling this out of you as well. My executive and the people that look to me to understand the risk about Bob are asking me about customer health score. They're asking me about the risk in the Bob. They're asking me about customer mood. And you really need all of that going on. So some challenges to you: make sure you balance the subjective and the objective together. You need both. Don't try to blend them into one thing, which is often what I see people trying to do. They try to create one metric to rule them all. And actually you want different data points to be able to allow you to compare things in your Bob. Start with account mood if you don't already have it. If you already have it, great. Create factors to make it actionable. Probably one of the most important things is there's not just one score. The score is made up of different items that you can then dive into and ask questions around how you might improve the score overall. Think beyond customer success. This is going to be important for your AMs, for your renewal managers, for whoever else might be in the account. Use it for your forecasts. So if you're finding that you're not using your own metric in your own work to report on what's going on, then you're probably not doing it right. And then finally work with your ops team. And that's my little call out to Andy. So thank you to everyone who's in the ops world that helps us sort of do these things. So I'll pause there, and I'm happy to take questions now until we're out of time.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that, Steve. It's very obvious that this was a very exciting project for you and that you put a lot of time and passion into it. And we are sending our most fantastic wishes to all of the Culturam team who have been not just on that webcast, but we see you as thought leaders in employee engagement and customer success in a lot of different organizations. So big shout outs to you. I've lots of questions. Let's just crack on. I'd like to combine two of them to begin with, exactly connected to how the different members of a customer success team work together. So one question was, what is the difference in functionality for roles in companies which have account managers and customer success managers? And which one of them would own the equivalent of the account mood? Who can update it?
Great question. That might have even been asked by my team, I think. The first thing is you're constantly I have a lot of thoughts on this. I'll try to be brief, but know that this is a big theme for even us. You want the philosophy, or the first principle I go back to, is that it shouldn't matter. Role shouldn't matter at some level. So if I think about this from the customer's perspective, the customer wants to subscribe to your subscription or to subscribe to your service, to use your product. They want to be successful when they're using it. And they then ultimately, hopefully, because they're so successful, they want to keep using your product as well as expand their usage of your product. When you're doing that, there are a number of different things that you need to do to help them achieve that. And for us, customer success, and I might jump around in my deck a little bit, but if I look at this deck, this is actually a little bit of a truncated view of what we would actually report on. This is exactly what you would see initially, but there are other sections of this, if you kind of scroll to the right, that talk about our expansion work. And so really at a very simple level, when I think about that question, we in customer success own the gross retention outcome of our customers. That includes churn and contraction. And our AMs really own the expansion piece of the outcome of net revenue retention. Net revenue retention, if you're not looking at it, is the most important metric for you in your business, not gross retention and churn necessarily. Gross retention and churn is what we try to act on as a customer success group. But what we're ultimately looking for is what I said before. Net revenue retention gives you a sense of whether you're not just keeping customers, but expanding them and growing them. And AM and whatever the roles are called, whoever is in your business responsible for upgrading and expanding accounts, and whoever's responsible for kind of keeping them happy and making sure that the health and the adoption is good, is really responsible for both. So to answer the question directly, who updates the mood, who updates that, and who does that? Both of our practices do. it tends to just be time-based. So customer success will typically kind of own and update the account mood in like the first 9-month period of a customer's account. The AM will typically, who sort of manages the commercial side of our relationship, so at renewals and expansions, will then typically update it during the final 3 months of a subscription period. But that doesn't mean that a coach can't go in and change the mood at that renewal point. And it also doesn't mean that an AM can't go in and change the mood during the normal point. It's a team sport ultimately. And that's why I think that team context is really important.
Awesome. And how do you feel about including the health score, factoring it in to KPIs for the CSMs or other members of the customer success team?
Great question. I don't do it because it's actionable, but it's hard to action those scores. Anyone that's kind of worked with a customer health metric will understand that. And it's quite tough. Customer success is a funny and tough game in that it's very hard to be sort of MECE with what you're doing. So MECE being mutually exclusive but collectively exhaustive. It's really hard to say this is the one thing that changed that customer's health. It's normally a factor of things, which is why you want your customer health score to also be factor based. So I don't, but we have started playing with that even just from my own point of view. I typically would want to see more. Yeah, it's an interesting question. I'm going to just answer it directly. I don't use it because of the reasons I just sort of said, but then also the final reason that I don't use it is because let's say you're ultimately trying to assess performance with that question. And so if I just ask you this question, if I rephrase it in a slightly different way and ask, which of your customer success managers would you want working on your hardest and most unhealthiest accounts? And for most people, the answer to that question is, I want my best customer success managers working on my hardest and most unhealthy accounts. So if you were using it as a performance metric, then your best performers are always going to be marked down because you're putting them on the most unhealthy customers. So that's one element of it. The other element, the final one on this, is that bobs change, especially in a growth business. So you have turnover in who's working with customers at different points, not necessarily because customer success people are leaving, but because regions change, people join. You're always kind of slightly behind the 8 ball in customer success because you're typically getting investment or headcount dollars after sales. So you're kind of always trying to be in a place where you're taking someone's bob and splitting it between 2 people, a new starter and someone that's been in that bob before. And so in the same way, should I mark the person that's just started really well and say they're a great performer because they've taken all of Marika's customers who are really healthy and green and happy just because they've taken all of those? Not necessarily. So it's a factor, it's a signal, but it's not, it's dangerous to attach it and say, this is the one way that we assess your performance.
Yeah, thank you for that. And I have to say, I agree. I was thinking of that context from the point of view as a kind of a relatively senior member of the customer success team here, and as an individual contributor, when you're given unhealthy accounts, it's almost like a compliment. But if you're rated on them being unhealthy, it's the other side of the coin. So some great points there. Thank you. And if you were to move a little bit to the modeling and construction of the customer health score. We have a point here raised by Dan who's thinking about the different types of customers that we have. So your smaller customers versus your enterprise customers. Like, would the way we decide health differ between the two? Because if we think about it, some of our smaller customers, how do we decide on the account mode there if our only touch with them is in a digital form?
Yeah, great question. We do that. We have this in our business too. So maybe just to speak about what we do, and hopefully that will provide some answer. So I think for SMB and smaller customers, we don't update an account mood. So that's the first thing. So we principally use customer health, and we won't use the account mood thing there. So that's the first thing. It makes it a little harder to do your forecasting because you have to build a forecast model based on the customer health score only. So your forecasting is a little less accurate. And it's quite a complex thing to do that well, and you need a lot of volume to do it well, which even at 2,000 customers, we've got slightly more than half of our Bob is kind of that SMB segment. And even with that many customers, we probably don't have enough data flowing through to really be able to do that well. And it's just expensive in terms of time. So that's probably the first thing on that one. I think at your SMB level, I would use we use the more objective health score, and that's probably the thing that's going to get you the biggest bang for buck. But we still have mood. We do still have instances where CSMs will engage with customers in that format. And so if they do get intel, they will update the mood, I guess is the way to say it. I guess the way to say it is we only use mood when we know, but we don't hold them to account on it. At the mid-market and enterprise level, it's at the account level. And so you're really trying to use it and construct it in such a way that you're able to get value from it at the singular level. So as an individual contributor, am I able to look at my account object in Salesforce and get value from the customer health score? As a team, are we able to look at it in a blended fashion or in a list fashion in a Bob? And as an exec, are we able to look at a blended score and get value from it? So that's that answer a little bit. Perhaps a way to answer it is that I wouldn't necessarily, I wouldn't start by trying to don't overcomplicate this for yourself. Don't build an SMB score and an enterprise score. I would just build one score, and then you're probably going to look at it differently depending on the segment. And so as an example, when I look at a cohort analysis by score of our Bob, I know that the SMB customers are healthier earlier than our enterprise customers, but I still think the customer health score is accurate.
That's amazing. And again, on that account mood side, you did say that this is a very subjective measurement, but is there any kind of a direction there? So do you have, for example, a subjective scale to tell you this is what a blue customer looks like, this is what a green one looks like? We
do, yeah. We have that documented so people can do it. I don't know if you want my take on how ours works, but I think some quick thoughts on it. We actually have 5 moods. So I think a lot of people take 3. 3's good. I think 5's better. The 5 are what I showed before: green, blue, orange, red, and then we have like a null value that's actually like, the null value can be deliberate, but often it isn't. But it's just an important thing. It's just as important signal for you as any of the colors. And 5 is better. This is actually a bit of a surveying thing. It just gives you more data points. It gives you more ability to kind of have more insight into what you're doing and kind of really zoom in on things a little bit more sharply. Can you remind me of the question, Marika? So that's the 5. That's the customer health score. Where was the question going?
You have a subjective scale. So
that's right. Yeah, we have. Thank you. Yeah. So we have descriptions of like what each one is. So green for us is like a raving fan. They would be a referrer. They would speak for us on stage. They're using the product really well, and we have really good relationships with the sort of senior personas in that business and our kind of like project management, project lead people in the business that are running the tool. Blue is kind of like maybe they wouldn't be a referral or be on stage as strongly. But we tend to typically still have a good relationship with the account and things are going well, but maybe not as strongly as a green. Orange, typically there's something that we're unsure of in the account and there's risk there. So maybe we don't have a connection with the most senior buyer or the senior decision maker, or there's been change in the account. We've lost the person we're dealing with, or someone new is in the business that's kind of driving in a different way. Or the product usage just isn't good. Like they're not using the product well or in the way that we would want to see them using it. And then red is typically reserved for stuff that we're pretty sure of. Like a customer might have said, we're going to market, we're not going to use you again. We're taking you to RFP, any of those lovely conversations that I'm sure you will have at different points. If you get something, if the customer, red shouldn't be a guess. Red should be something that you know. The customer has told you what they think of you and it's not good. And so that would be what I reserve red for. And then null, often the null value actually means the coach hasn't updated the account, which from a management point of view is just as useful to sort of watch. It also can mean that the customer is new, which is just as valuable. So we'll typically see null values in the first month or 2 of a customer's life as we're getting them going. And then the coach will normally update that somewhere in that first couple of months to kind of be where they think the health is at. And we coach our people on how to do that. There's documentation on it. But ultimately it becomes a cultural thing. Like in all those team meetings and all of those formats where people are meeting, like I can walk into a meeting and we have a subjective discussion about whether something's orange or blue, or whether it's conservative orange or whatnot. Those are all things that are more tacit than anything else.
Amazing. Documentation is customer success's friend. So I think that's the idea where we all want to get to. We only have 2 minutes left. I don't know where time went, to be honest, today. That was such an interesting conversation. So I'm going to ask one final question from Darren. He's asking, what steps do you take to roll out a new version of your health score, especially if it changes the overall scores substantially?
Yeah, I mentioned we were actually in the middle of doing this right now. So we're basically going through all of the steps I just told you about. We're doing all of these things, and we're kind of re-looking at the whole score and tweaking it. The things we'll do is we won't actually change into the underlying infrastructure. So all of the places that people look in Salesforce will remain the same, which is the first change management piece here. The fact that we don't have to change all that means that that's easy. But then second, it's just good change management. We'll communicate what's changed and how, and whether our rankings of the scores and how we understand those are different or not. So it's communication basically. And then again, like you have to just keep operationalizing it and showing up. So like when you're in so, you know, it's that old thing, like say it once, say it a million times. So when you're in the meetings, like remind people, hey, don't forget, we changed the customer health score a month ago. This is how it's going to be different. In my other meetings I'm having with other regions around the world, this is how I'm seeing it be different. If you're a CS leader, you can really help play the connector between the different groups in your business to help them understand how the different parts of the world are using the score and what's working and what's not working from your perspective.
100%. We actually have time for one more question. Amazing. So, and I think it's going to be a good wrap up. If you're a company that's just starting to implement customer health score at the moment, and you were to go to your desk tomorrow, what's the first thing you were going to do?
The first thing would be to have an account mood. So if you don't have that, that's the best thing to do. I could go on, but like if you have nothing, then you really need that account mood to get started. After that, if you've got account mood, what's the first step? Then I think the first step is really going through and creating. The first one is actually almost defining your factors. You can do that yourself. Ask yourself a bunch of questions. Try to frame things through the lens of questions that you want to ask the data. Don't just geek out at the data. Don't just say, oh, we can get all these scores. It's all great. Really sit down and kind of almost ask yourself, you know, the questions like what makes a successful customer and what are the factor level factors? Like what are the different buckets? How could I categorize those answers, you know? So do that, build an Excel spreadsheet, then start walking around the business with that and filling it out.
Amazing. Steve, thank you. That was such an exciting conversation. As I said, I have no clue where an hour went. And thank you for all the participants who stayed with us and asked all of the exciting questions that we had for today. I'm sure that this was useful to everyone. Certainly it was useful to me. So please, Steve, accept thanks on behalf of myself and the whole Customer Success Network. It's been so great to have you. Guys, we're going to be back with you next month for another exciting topic. Look out for a registration link and the event as usual. I'm looking forward to seeing everybody. Have a fantastic afternoon or a great day, depending on where on the globe you are today. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Marika.